Hey friends, Zachary Avery here. A few years ago, I was backpacking throughout Asia and Australia, and I started this series on Facebook of videos that I called Walk With Me, and some of you might remember those. And basically what they were is I would just be, wherever I was that day, and I would just go out for a little walk, and I would record a video, and we would just chat. I would kind of give you an update, and I would also just share musings about what I was learning in that moment, or things that were on my mind, or just giving encouragement and stuff like that, right? It's just like, but the thing is, I called it Walk With Me, and I encouraged people to actually go out on a walk with me as they listen to the thing. So it was also a way to promote movement and a little bit of exercise. So good for our health in every dimension. So what a cool time to relaunch this idea and this concept of Walk With Me, because a lot of us are not moving as much as we normally do. We're much more sedentary. We're indoors a lot more. And we're also just going through a lot of stress and anxiety as a collective. And so I'm gonna relaunch this Walk With Me series. I'm thinking maybe once a week I'll post a video. And so the invitation is you can join me if you'd like on a walk. Preferably outdoors, if you can. I know we're all kind of taking different levels of precautions at this point. So maybe you're just taking a walk in your backyard, or maybe you're taking a walk in your neighborhood, or just take a walk around your house. Just move a little bit. I invite you to walk with me. So, and then the other thing that I'll say before I dive into today's topic, which is self-compassion, very juicy. The other thing that I'll say is I am currently in the process of transitioning my business into a new iteration that will be more digital, more virtual, online, and so forth. And that's going to take a little time. So in the meantime, I'm offering, I've been posting on Instagram these lovely, messages and encouragements every day for the last month or so. And I also am providing content on Facebook and, just throughout social media in general. And so this Walk With Me series is going to be another extension of that, another opportunity to connect. And I'm doing all of this work for free right now, and it is valuable. And so if it supports you and if it helps you, especially during these challenging times, if you're able financially, I would really appreciate your support. I'm supporting you guys. I appreciate it if you can support me a little, a lot, whatever you can do. I'm going to attach all my handles to each of these videos as far as Venmo and Cashapp and PayPal. And so, yeah, there you go. We're all in this together right now. I'm just trying to figure out this new normal. So what I'd really like to dig in today about is this concept of self-compassion. And what I have realized over the last number of years is that when I toss out the term self-compassion, a lot of people in our culture and in our society don't really have a good grasp on what I mean by that term. I've been leading retreats and workshops and classes about self-care since 2014, and periodically I will throw in this concept of self-compassion into these sorts of retreats and workshops. And what I've noticed is people really don't have a way to differentiate self-compassion from self-care. And they are two different things. they can overlap and they can support each other for sure, but they're two different experiences. So I want to dive into self-compassion today, and I want to talk about that. And I guess probably the best place to start talking about self-compassion would be starting the conversation with talking about compassion in general, because I think compassion is something that most of us are much more familiar with, because we know what compassion means, we know what it looks like, we know what it sounds like, we know what it feels like, we know how to give it. Hopefully we've had experiences where we've received it. So compassion is the antidote to suffering. That's what's up as far as when I'm talking about compassion, that's what I'm talking about. Compassion is the most appropriate response to suffering. So anytime that we or someone is going through suffering, that's going to be the most helpful response, is showing up with compassion. And so what we're talking about there with compassion is like, there's an element of non-judgment, there's an element of just showing up and being there and not trying to fix it, not trying to change it, whatever the problem is, whatever the difficulty is, whatever that suffering is. We just show up and we allow ourselves to be present. Hopefully this wind isn't too noisy for the mic. We allow ourselves to be present with the mess and with the hurt, with the suffering. So that's compassion, right? We know what compassion is. Now I'm talking about self-compassion. So I'm talking about taking those same qualities, those same attributes, and flipping them so that we're giving them to ourselves. And this is really profound. And I have a resource, and it's a book by Dr. Kristin Neff, and it's titled Self-Compassion. And I am going to include a link to that book. It's just an Amazon link, but you can find it anywhere. But that way you'll at least be able to see the cover of the book, because I guess there's maybe 2 different editions of the book. So, wow. This book, Self-Compassion, Kristin Neff, game changer. Life-changing book. One of the best books that I've ever read, ever, about anything. And so I am not exaggerating this. Like, I hope that you're like hearing my words and taking it seriously, because wow, this is an incredible gift that she has given us. And so really the reality is, these days, while we're going through all of this collective and individual suffering of varying degrees, the biggest encouragement that I'm giving to people is to learn about self-compassion and practice self-compassion. And so if you can get a hold of her book, I would really encourage you to buy her book. You can get it physically, you can get it on Kindle, you can get it through Audible. However you like to consume your books, it's available. And now I want to talk a little bit about what she shares in the book, just a few of my big takeaways. I had so many takeaways, but here's self-compassion in a nutshell. So a lot of times, so again, right, just to reiterate, self-compassion, or just compassion in general, is the antidote to suffering, right? It's the best and it's the most proper response, most appropriate response. So what Kristin Neff says in her book is, most of the time when we are suffering, we don't recognize that that's actually what's happening. Okay? And this is like such a powerful idea, because if I've learned anything from psychology and from personal development and from my own journey, it's the power of being able to put your finger on something and identify it for what it is. That is most of the battle, most of the time, right? Once we've been able to label and identify something, that's the biggest, right? That's the biggest part of the process. And so what Kristin Neff is saying in this book is most of the time when we're suffering, we don't recognize that we're suffering. We aren't able to put our finger on what's happening. And so what happens, because we aren't able to put our finger on it and know it for what it is, because if we could put our finger on it and know it for what it is, then we have the clarity to say, okay, this is suffering. Compassion is the answer right now, right? That's why identifying is most of the battle. It's because once you've identified it, it's like, okay, yeah, what do I need now? Like, now that I know what it is, okay, it's easy. Compassion. Okay? So we often aren't able to identify suffering for what it is when it's happening in our own personal lives, right? It's easy to identify it for other people, and that's how we're able to respond with compassion for other people. But a lot of times when we're suffering, since we don't recognize it for what it is, we end up making it worse. We end up making it harder for ourselves because maybe we beat ourselves up. Maybe we're really critical and harsh with ourselves. It's just like, it's like all of the opposite things of compassion, right? And so that's just going to exaggerate our suffering even more and make it worse. So if we are able to identify in the moment that suffering is what's happening, wow, this is a game changer. And so this is why I'm really emphasizing this book and this teaching and this practice for this point in time, because we are all suffering right now. Getting in some shade here. Okay, so we're all suffering. And so what Kristin Neff does in this book is she gives you a lot of really practical tools and exercises for ways that you can develop self-compassion in your life. And one of them that I love all of them. They're all so good. And they're also available on her website. A lot of them you can get for free on her website. I think it's like selfcompassion.org. Maybe like self-compassion.org or something like that. But she teaches to take a self-compassion break. And so what this is, it's 4 sentences, or it's 3 or 4 statements that you make to yourself. And so I'll say them, and then I'm going to walk through each one and talk about why it's powerful and why it works and the purpose behind it, the theory behind it. So first of all, statement number 1, I'll go ahead and cross the street here. Statement number 1, you say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Statement number 2, suffering is a part of life, or suffering is a part of the human condition. Statement number 3, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And then the optional statement 4, may I give myself what I need. So these are the 4 statements, and you could definitely tweak them or revise them however you wanted to, kind of finding your own words. And this is why I want to share the theory behind each statement, is so you could kind of write your own script if those particular words don't resonate for you, or you have other words that would work better. So statement 1, this is a moment of suffering. So this is the fundamental thing, right? This is the experience of us putting our finger on the issue and identifying and labeling. Ah, suffering. That's what's happening right now. Okay, so that's number one. You identify it. Number two, she teaches two options, like suffering is a part of life or suffering is a part of the human condition. And the point of that phrase, in her book, she talks about finding shared humanity. And so what this means is a lot of times when we're suffering and when we're in these dark places, we can feel very isolated. Hello, especially right now, we are literally self-isolating. So we can feel very isolated and very alone in our experience and in our suffering. And so what statement 2 is about is recognizing that I am not the only one that's suffering. I am not in this alone. There are many other people going through this experience. And so it helps start to break us out of some of the additional drama that can accumulate and can exaggerate our suffering, right? So that's statement 2. Suffering is a part of life, or suffering is a part of the human condition, right? I'm not in this alone. Statement number 3 and 4 are really connected with each other. So you could say one or you could say both. But it's, may I be kind to myself in this moment, and or may I give myself what I need. And so it's this thought of showing up for yourself from a compassionate place, a compassionate framework. And so, and this is a really, I mean, all of these are really powerful concepts, but when I'm teaching about self-care, I really, like, one of the most powerful tools that I could ever give someone is to make it a practice to check in with yourself, to see what it is in this moment that you need. Because, you know, it's as soon as we can label and identify something, then we're empowered to take action toward that thing, right? So if I can label and identify my needs, I can get them met. So it's the same concept here. May I be kind to myself in this moment, right? This is me embodying and acting compassionately toward myself. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself what I need. And in the book, she offers other phrases, but those are the 3 or 4. And I, like, literally, this is like my message right now to people, is like the only homework that I'm assigning anyone right now is read her book, practice self-compassion, because we so need it. And here's the other thing, that, like, we're coming up to about 20 minutes here, so I'm gonna try to cap it maybe around 20 minutes, because a 20-minute walk, right? That's nice. That's what's advisable. And so, but I have a few more things that I'd like to add. When I have offered the self-compassion as the topic for a workshop and asked people about, like, what is something that you can do for yourself this upcoming week to be compassionate with yourself, like, I've gotten answers like, one person said that they needed to have better time management, and one person said that they needed to clean up and tidy their house and their room. And this is the important distinction, or this is one important distinction between self-care and self-compassion, right? Because, so for self-compassion, if you're having this experience where you're like, wow, I need better time management, the compassionate thing to do is to meet yourself where you are and try to maybe dig a little bit deeper into the experience and see what's going on underneath. See where you are unsettled, see where is the suffering, and just meet yourself there in that pain, right? So it's not about, oh, I need to whip into shape. and I need to be better and do better. No, it's about that gentle, compassionate, non-judgmental approach, right? We're able to give these things to other people, and that means that we can give these things to ourselves, right? We have this capacity, okay? And so likewise, the person that said they needed to clean their room or their whole house or whatever, that would be an example of like self-care, something along those lines. Cleaning and time management, those are good self-care practices and tips and strategies. But again, self-compassion would say, you know what, like this is a mess and I would like to clean it up. And I'm meeting myself right where I am right now. Because this is maybe my last point, is that we, in this moment, and in any moment of suffering, what we need is to be soothed. And that is the primary need. And so my encouragement is to give yourself that. And then after that's been met, a lot of times then we're able to take that action or to make those changes or adjustments or do whatever we need. But if we just try to push through and power through, that's not as effective. It's not as effective, and it's not the healthiest way, right? What we need is compassion. So let's meet ourselves with compassion. You know, Kristen Neff in the book makes the point really well. She makes this point really well, that self-compassion is not laziness. It's not, because it doesn't end there, right? This is like the starting point, is self-compassion, and then action can be taken after we're soothed, because that's what we need. So my encouragement today, this week, this month, this year, take those self-compassion breaks. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself what I need. And I ask that you be so gentle and tender and compassionate with yourself, because that's what you need. Thanks so much for joining me on this walk today, and I'll talk to you soon. Love you.